I come from a Christian home. My mother is quite a well-known Christian author. She and my father gave me the perfect upbringing. Got 5 brothers and sisters. I left home, went to university, then went on to the army. I got the Sword of Honour at Sandhurst, which was awarded by the Queen to the officer cadet who passed out top of their intake. I served in Bosnia and Northern Ireland, and for a period of time was the youngest major in the British Army. I left the army aged 30 and I went to work in the city, and had a successful career in the city in finance. I was married to a gorgeous lady. I had a son with another one on the way. We owned our own house. I had a smart car, she had a smart car. We had holidays. We had everything we could ever want. And then one Saturday morning, I was bored at home. I turned on the TV, a rugby match came on. There was an advertising horde to say £5 free bet. I got my laptop from nowhere. I'd never placed a bet before, opened an account online, put a £5 bet on, and I won that bet. And I often wonder what would happen if I'd lost that bet. But I won, and from that moment on, I slowly developed a habit in online gambling. I didn't tell my wife because it felt somehow dirty, not really clean. I don't think she'd have been too pleased to know I was wasting my money. After my initial win, I began to lose more often than not. And one day, I did a calculation to work out how much I had lost. And I stepped over the line because I began to chase my losses. I didn't like losing. I felt I was a competitive person. I hated losing. So I calculated how much I could put down to win everything back in one go. I borrowed the £1,000 that I needed to do that, and I lost. From then on, I just let myself go. I began to place more and more bets. I began to spend more and more time on my own upstairs. I withdrew from work. I withdrew from being a father. I stopped functioning as a husband. When I spent all the money that I had in savings, I started taking the equity out of our house without telling my wife. In the second year of gambling, I was borrowing heavily wherever I could, from the banks, from credit cards, from payday loans, anyone who'd lend me money. I lied to my friends to get money from them. I even lied to my mum, who guaranteed a loan for me. In the third year, I had lost all reason, and I was doing some stupid things. Financially, I had no money left. I was servicing my debt. I had a 6-figure salary, and all my monthly wage was going to service the debt to pay off my gambling debts. I began selling things in the house, and when there was nothing obvious left to sell, I put some money on my corporate card from work. I knew I'd be found out, but it took them 2 months before they phoned up and said we had to have a talk. I lost my job, but still that wasn't enough. I had further to fall. Even when my wife finally found out, when she found a bank statement, I still hadn't reached my rock bottom. She left a few weeks later, and that was a dark time for me. I was having suicidal thoughts. I sold things that were very special to us, very precious, that couldn't be replaced. And then one day my mum got to hear that I was about to be made homeless. I had 5 months rent owing, and she came up and sat me down with my brother and my dad and just said, look, you're going to be homeless, or you can come back and live with one of us. That was my rock bottom. All my pride that had stopped me from talking about my problem and being open about it had gone out the window, and I was totally humiliated. My relationship with God had suffered. I had a close walk with God before I started gambling, but I knew gambling was wrong. I knew it was selfish. I knew my stealing and my lying and my cheating was wrong. And rather than asking for help, I just carried on, and that blocked my relationship completely with God. So that night when I got home to my mum's spare room, which I'd left 18 years old, bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, going out into the world with a black bin liner of stuff to my name now, I got down on my knees and I prayed. I asked for forgiveness, and I asked for help. My pride finally had been broken, and God could do his work of restoring and healing. And he has done that since. We did some practical things to start with. I saw someone about my debts. I had £70,000 worth of debt. And I had to see someone quickly about that. And there was a Christian organisation through my church that gave me some debt counselling, and we quickly rescheduled things and got back on track. I got back into work. So the financial things began to be restored. They're the first things that came back. But my relationship with my children and my wife was still very difficult. They were living in Derbyshire and I was living down in Kent. I tried all I could to go and see them, but it was very difficult to do that. In terms of my own self-respect, because that's something that I lost, I began swimming again, and I can say now that in just over a week I'm going to attempt to cross to France. Why would I do that when there's perfectly good ferries that can take me? I don't know, but I want to give something back. I've taken so much. My little son Matthew has hemiplegia, right side hemiplegia. He had a stroke when he was born. And I'm raising some money for his charity, a charity that support young people with hemiplegia, which is all good. And I've been able to write a book over the last year. Not an addiction book, not a rescue manual. It's just purely a story. It's my story, if you like. And it's a story of hope too, because I totally believe that day when I got down on my knees, Christ came in and changed me. I started working the 12-step program through Gamblers Anonymous. I was never quite comfortable with Gamblers Anonymous because I knew in my heart that it was God that had healed me, not a God of my understanding. It was my creator and not my higher power. So I had always been looking for some way of going to a recovery group that actually was honest, that actually admitted that it's the power of Christ that sets us free. And so I was delighted to find the recovery course. The fundamental step for me, and the reason why I caused so much destruction in my life, I lost my job and my home, my wife and my children, was because I hadn't reached step one. I wasn't ready to admit that I had a problem. I felt if I did have a problem, I was the one that had to fix it. I just thought I could carry on gambling and bet my way out of trouble, which is a complete delusion. Over the space of 3 years, I lost £750,000 in total through my gambling. Money that was mine, money that was my wife's, money that was belonging to other people and my own company. The thing that it robs you of is it robs you of your logical thought. No father would treat their children in the way that I treated Matthew on the day when all he wanted to do was go to the swings with his dad. And it was a wet day. We were down at my in-laws' house, and Matthew just kept saying, I want to go to the swings with my daddy, I want to go to the swings. So my wife Emma, she said, okay, but go home first and get his coat, because it's raining. So we drove back. Matthew was all excited on our way, and then he realised we weren't actually going directly to the swings. He was a bit disappointed. I pulled up outside the house, went in, put my hand on the coat, and then I just remembered a bet that I placed that morning. And I just thought, oh, go and check that my account's been credited. So I went upstairs and I checked, and I'd lost that bet. I was so cross that the bet was going to destroy my time with my son. I sat there, and 2.5 hours later, my bank account was empty, and I went downstairs, and Matthew had fallen asleep in the car, and streaks of the dried tears were on his cheeks. The depths you fall to are horrible when an addiction takes hold of you and makes you do things that you would never do. My most prized possession of all that I had, it wasn't particularly valuable, but it was the sword of honour I was awarded by the Queen on the day I graduated from the Royal Military Academy Sandhurst. It was something that was going to be handed down to my children. It was a precious, precious thing. One day I took it to an antique shop in the town. I got £200 for it, and I was crying as I left that shop because I knew what I'd done, and I lost that money in just a couple of hours that afternoon. The worst bet I ever placed, the biggest bet that I ever placed, was for a bet that did look like a dead cert. I back the world's #1 tennis player, a women's tennis player, Victoria Azarenka at the time. She was playing a rank outsider, a couple of 100 points below her in the world rankings. I had to bet a lot of money because the odds were so bad. To get a couple of £100 back, I bet £17,000 that she would win. She won the first set, and so when my wife shouted up from downstairs, "Let's go and get some toilet brushes, we need to buy one," I thought, "No, okay, no problem." Rather than making an excuse like I would have done, I got up and we went to the DIY shop. We were looking for these toilet brushes, and I remember sneaking off round an aisle to have a look at my phone to make sure the money had been credited to my account. I couldn't work out why it hadn't. I found out from another sports page that she had got injured in the second set and forfeited the game. My wife popped her head round the aisle then, holding these two brushes, one for £1.50 and one for £2, and she said, "Oh, which one should we choose?" I could have bought 8,000 toilet brushes for the price of the bet that I just lost, and I said, "Oh, £1.51." That's an example of the sheer deceit that you go to, and the depths that you can stoop to. So really, when I was broken, I reached that point where I knew I had a problem. I put my hand up and asked for some help. The recovery course helped me a huge amount because I felt it was just an honest course. Rather than pretending that your higher power is a chair in the corner, you're actually being honest and saying it's God. And what I would say to anyone who's coming to recovery course for the very first time is stick it out. Give it a couple of goes. If you maybe don't feel comfortable the first week, come back the second week, because you will find recovery here. I am just amazed at the sheer percentage of people that this has helped. From all walks of life, from all kinds of addictions, people who believe in God and people who don't. You don't have to be a Christian to come and get recovery. It's there for you. Stick with it. Keep coming. And even when you don't feel like coming, keep coming again. And I guarantee when you go home, you will feel so much better. It's been quite a journey. It is still a journey. I recognise that I will always be a gambling addict, and I am only one better way from trashing my life again. So I take one step at a time, but I also believe immensely in the power of Christ to heal us. And I do think that he healed me that night back in November 2012, but I am not complacent. Things that are important to me now aren't money, status, popularity. Things that are important are relationships, and I know that I have to keep closely walking with Christ because he's the one that set me free, and the healing that I have is an ongoing healing, and it's just amazing what he's done. Just amazing.